PK Wood, thanks for coming in, brother. How are you?
And I'm great. I'm glad to be here.
We're glad to have you. You grew up in a brutal environment. You were abandoned at 5 years old, left at a crack house by your mother. You were doing drive-bys and break-ins in homes when you were a child. You didn't have a father present. And you ended up in the foster system. But then on top of that, you turned around and went to work for the foster system to do a better job than some of the people that may have let you down. And now you're working as a mentor for young men and women ages 18 to 26 that are actually diagnosed with a mental health disorder, to mentor them and allow them to grow and become a success like yourself, and show them a path that maybe you didn't have shown to you. So tell us about your upcoming life and everything that you've been through.
Yeah. So growing up, it was me, my mom, and my grandmother, and we'd often live in shelters. My mom would be out of the house, out and about with random men, going to work, and my grandma would watch me. So I built a very close relationship with my grandmother. And there was often times when I was younger, I'd get in spurts of anger, and the only person that'd be able to calm me down would be my grandmother. I used to get kicked out of daycares. I used to get kicked out of schools, preschools, just because I had so much anger, and I would retaliate, and I was a violent child. Although every time I heard the words of my grandmother, it just felt her presence. It felt like all the stress, all the worries that I ever had just vanished in an instant.
Yeah.
And so she was really my rock, and she was my mom's rock.
And you didn't have a father around to show you how to kind of manage and control that anger and rage, right?
Yeah, the relationship with my father was pretty non-existent. He was only around here and there. It wasn't consistent that I'd see him. The last time that I saw him was age 3, and at 18 I found out that he had passed away back in 2009.
Yeah. So how old would that have made you when he passed away?
I would have been 9 years old.
9 years old. So it was 9 years after that that you even found out that he had passed.
15 years after. So I actually used to work at a law firm, and they figured out how to run a skip trace on my parents. And that's how I initially found out where my biological mother was at 18, and that my biological father had passed. And so the date that I saw on the report that we got back was that he had passed away in Michigan in 2009.
So you were in the foster system, and you had a couple situations where you were adopted for a year, and then that adoption failed, right?
Yeah, so we were in a visitation process of adoption.
Okay.
And so it was never an actual adoption. It was considered a failed adoption.
Okay.
I was in the visitation process with that family. I was still 6 years old. I was 6 years old at the time. And I remember one day we were driving on a highway, and they had talked about changing my name. And I told them as a child, I told them that they could not change my name, because if they did, then my mom, biological mother, would never be able to find me.
Did they like threaten you that if you weren't willing to change your name that they were going to send you back, or?
I don't remember.
Okay.
What I remember from them is them being pretty cold afterwards. And I remember that they called my DCS case manager at the time and canceled the adoption. And then luckily I was placed into the same foster home that I was at previously.
So you were 6 years old. I mean, that has to take a toll on your psyche, even at 6 years old. Feeling rejected from the first family that's attempted to adopt you. And I get, like, yes, luckily you ended up getting to go back to the same foster home that you were in. However, that has to affect the way that you were feeling about yourself at 6 years old.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because there was a lot of instability in my life at a young age. So prior to foster care, I was bouncing around all over the place, from being homeless with my mom to getting into shelters to crashing at random guys' houses. I never had a bedroom. I never had a bed that was mine. And so going into foster care, my first foster home, it was actually a group home, which is different than a foster home.
Yeah.
Because a group home is where there's kids of different ages or similar age, all in the house. And then there's staff members that come into the group home and they facilitate different activities throughout the day. They're supposed to ensure that children in the group home get to where they need to go, whether that's school, aftercare programs, events, appointments.
Okay. So you're in foster care. You get adopted. It becomes a failed adoption. You go back into a visitation phase again.
With a different family, yeah.
Right. And then you end up becoming adopted after that as well, or how did that work?
Yeah, so the first family never adopted me. We started the adoption process.
Okay.
And then when that failed, I went back to the same foster home that I was at previously. And then there was another family, a single mom with a son, and she was interested in adopting me. So she started coming to my foster home for 6 months, and we'd do visitations. And then she'd take me out into the community. In a way, it was CPS at the time. The way that they did adoptions,
Okay.
with a 6 month visitation process, and then the child would live with a family for 6 months, and then at the end, there'd be the final court session, and then all parties would agree on me getting adopted, and I would also get a say on if I felt comfortable enough to be adopted.
Yeah. So you came up in the foster system, you came up with adoptions and everything like that. You lived through a lot of really hard times prior to that, and I assume as well, while also in the adoption phases and such. What things led to you feeling as though you needed to hop back into the foster system to work in it professionally? What types of things did you see that motivated you to fix that or find yourself to be a valuable asset that can reach kids that maybe other people can't?
Growing up after the adoption, I mean, at age 5, there was a void that was created because I didn't have my mom in my life, and that was my superhero. So despite all of the negative things that were happening, the drug use, the abuse, the neglect, in my eyes, my mom was my superhero, because every time I would get hit by a man, she would be there to try and prevent it from happening again. And I don't have any memories of my mom not ever trying to defend me, despite us being in those poor environments.
And she's the only person that you really could consider a family member at that time, right?
Yeah, after my grandmother's passing.
Yeah. So you look at her from a lens of perfection. You build out this mindset about who she is and remembering the good times or glorifying the heroic things that she did. And so you have this perception of who she is, and years go by, and then you meet her. Did she live up to your standard, or?
No, she didn't. Growing up with that adoptive family, there was a lack of emotional support.
Okay.
And so growing up, I always felt alienated. I was treated different. I didn't feel like I fit in. I think that my adoptive mom did the best that she knew how to do.
Right.
And what I think the most important piece of the adoption was it gave me the stability, my first ever sense of stability, and that allowed me to network and create relationships.
Okay. And so how long of a gap was it from you seeing your mom when she abandoned you at 5 until you ended up meeting back up with her as you were older?
13 years.
13 years. So for 13 years, you're building this superhero in your head.
Mm-hmm.
And then what was it like when you finally got to see her again?
It was tough. It was real tough. And, for 13 years, I was also told by the adoptive family that I would get support in searching for her. And I remember I had my best friend, who's like my brother. No, he is my brother. And I remember on my 18th birthday, it was 11:59, October 10th, 11:59. And as soon as that clock turned to 12 a.m. on October 11th, I asked my adoptive mom to use her car. And my brother and me went to the last addresses that we found that my biological mom lived at. And we went searching all night till the sun came up. And we didn't find anything. And shortly after, that's when I asked my boss at the law firm, who's also my godmother now, for assistance. And she was able to run a skip trace and find the most recent address that my mom was last located at. And my uncle, adoptive uncle, who actually was also adopted into the same family that I was, he went through a similar process with finding his parents. And so he wanted to be there when I did. So he went with me when we got the most recent address, and it was a shady apartment area, not the best area, and reminded me a lot of places that I used to live back with my mom when I was a child.
Yeah.
And we had knocked on the door, and two ladies had answered, and I had told them, I asked them if Gail was here. And they said, "Why? Who are you?" And I told them that I'm Gail's son and I'm looking for her.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, Gail doesn't have a son. He got hit by a car at the age of 5, and he never survived. And there was a little bit of arguing back and forth because I had to prove to them that I was her son. And they had told me that she wasn't there and that she was out. So my uncle left his phone number with them, and then we went back to my house, and he just kind of sat and talked with me in the car because I was very emotional at the time because I thought that this was going to be the night that I finally got to see her.
And rightfully so. You just got told that your biological mother was claiming that you were dead.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that has to be something brutal for a freshly 18-year-old man to have to go through.
Yeah, it broke me in a sense. Because I didn't understand why. I didn't understand why someone would leave their kid, not find them, and then claim that their kid is dead. And actually that same night that I got back to my house after that encounter, I got a phone call. And it was from my biological mom.
Okay.
And for the first time, I heard her voice in 13 years, and I just broke down crying.
Yeah.
And it just felt so healing and calming because for the first time in 13 years, I've finally made contact with my mom. And I was incessant for years. And I had so many encounters and so many times and attempts trying to search for her in foster care, out of foster care, on field trips. Anytime I was out of the house, I would constantly look for her.
So you live through a massive amount of abandonment. You go through abusive relationships with mom's boyfriend. You go through break-ins at a young age with gang members and drive-bys with gang members. Then you get put into the foster system. You have the failed adoption hit. So there's a sense of rejection there. You hit 18 years old. You search for your mom. You find her. And then you get told by people at her door that she's claiming you were dead. You've spent 18 years either experiencing life with her for the 5 years, and then 13 years of building up this heroic archetype in your mind of who she is, this impervious force that's going to make everything right. And then you finally talk to her. Of course, that's going to be an emotional situation. A 18-year-old man, literally just turned 18 years old, has gone through so many things that would break the average person. And you emotionally break down from hearing your mom's voice. What was the conversation like?
She started crying too, hearing my voice. So we both began to just break down and cry.
Yeah.
The first few sentences were just about how much we missed each other, how much she loved me, and I was able to start asking questions, and I was able to understand as to why she left. And I didn't judge her at first. However, it was the first initial meeting where I first got to see her for the first time now in 13 years.
Yeah.
And it was like just that embrace of feeling my mother's hug since 13 years.
Yeah.
And it was very uplifting, very enlightening. I didn't know how to describe how it felt. It was like a feeling of safety.
Right.
And then it was shortly after that I started to understand that she hadn't changed that much. What brought me peace was that she always did love me. And what was hard to deal with was that she was still using drugs. She was still dating abusive men. She was still in a poor environment. And I got to a point where she had asked me if it would be okay if she sold drugs to make money. And that's when everything clicked. And it was that the woman that I had built up in my head for 13 years didn't exist.
Yeah.
And that this is who my mom is at this moment.
Yeah. So obviously there's a lot of things that you're missing in life. You lived an outlier story growing up, right? You did not have the normal childhood white picket fence, right? And so you go through all of these different things. You have all of these different feelings as you're growing up. And then it comes time to step into adulthood in the professional world. And you choose to step back into the foster system and go to work for DCS. What things pushed you to do that? What thoughts about things that you may have lacked in your experience pushed you to then do all that you could to make sure that other children facing similar situations don't have to go through it?
I wanted to be the person that I wish that I had. And from all those years of feeling all of these emotions and turmoil that I felt deep within, that nobody understood because nobody could relate to me. Nobody could relate to the trauma that I'd go through. So friendships throughout high school, throughout middle school were tough because not a lot of people could relate or understand what I was going through. And there was either loss of friendships or loss of relationships because of the trauma that I had gone through. And I do also attribute that I hadn't processed a lot of that trauma either. So it was really difficult. And I got the opportunity from an old classmate from high school that had told me about a program that is at DCS where they are looking for people with lived experience in the foster care system to come and work with teens that are currently in the foster care system. And when I heard about that opportunity, I was working as a security guard in nightclubs in Scottsdale.
Yeah.
And it wasn't filling a void. It was a means to get by. It was something to do.
Right.
And I was out there for 3 years, and I realized that this isn't what I'm going to be doing the rest of my life. This isn't something that I enjoy doing anymore.
So the first day that you step into the DCS office as now a professional, what thoughts are going through your mind?
It was fear.
Fear. Tell me,
Yeah.
what about it?
Well, for me, I felt like an animal that was in a facility, being a child in care. Because everything that I had ever known was altered and changed. And I was given these rules, restrictions. I was surrounded by random people. These people just kept asking me questions. And then I had a routine that I had to follow. And all these foreign people, I was in foreign environments. I experienced trauma even in the foster care system. And so now I'm at the age where I'm no longer a child, I'm a man. And I get to see DCS from a lens that I didn't know existed. And I got to experience good people that work for DCS. And I didn't realize that DCS is statewide and it isn't just a county, it's the entire state. And there's over 50 different departments. And everybody has a role to play. And some of those people that play those roles never actually see the children. They never see what's really going on in the group homes. They never see how life is.
So what unique perspective are you bringing to the table? I mean, obviously the lived experience of being in the system. Which ways are you implementing that into these children's lives that changes things for them?
Yeah, I got to say I was fortunate enough to be a part of the creation of a program called transitional housing.
Okay.
Which was housing built for teens in extended foster care, and that is ages 18 to 21. Okay. So those teens that are turning 18 that don't have any family support, that don't have a place to go, well, there was a program created called extended foster care, which was created back in 2009 in the state of Arizona. And what that program struggled with was the housing for the 18 to 21 year olds. So after that housing was created, I started being boots on the ground and helping move in children turning 18 into those new transitional housing facilities that were part of different companies. And I mean, before that, I was working as a peer mentor, and I'd work with all the kids that other DCS people kind of wrote off, because not everybody's perfect, and a lot of people have opinions and biases, and that shows up in work. And unfortunately, it impacts children in the system, because certain workers that work for the organization that are assigned to those children don't do them justice because of their personal opinions of the children, instead of taking their personal reasons out of it and seeing that child for who they are and what they're going through.
Right. So what do you think is the biggest flaw in the foster system right now?
I would say the lack of understanding of where these children are and where they're coming from.
What would you say that the system gets right that the public often overlooks?
That those people that never do see the light of day, when it comes to seeing those children that are in the group homes, that they are working on policies, that they are working on billing, that they are working on placing these kids at placements that they feel are appropriate.
Okay.
And one thing that I saw, there was a lack of understanding with these teens.
Yeah.
And so I would get the cases that a lot of people wouldn't want. So teens addicted to fentanyl, teens that are going through sex trafficking, teens that have gang involvement, or teens that have cartel involvement. And at the end of the day, what I noticed with all of these teens is that they felt the same feelings that I felt when I was in care, or even when I was adopted. They were angry, they were frustrated, they were abandoned, they had trauma that they hadn't processed yet, and they had all of these emotions. So they would turn to all of these different outlets that weren't healthy, or they would turn to these different ways to cope.
What would you say to any at-risk youth right now that might be listening, not necessarily here in Arizona, but anywhere in the world? What do they need to hear right now? Best possible piece of advice that you can give them to keep them from possibly making those poor decisions.
I would tell those children, those teens, those adolescents, at-risk youth, that they're not alone, that their actions do not define them, that their environment does not define them, where they come from does not define them, what people tell them that they are, whether they call them a statistic or a stereotype, that does not define them, and that their daily choices, the life that they choose to create, the relationships they choose to build, that defines who you are.
So when you say that the relationships define who you are, I mean, I know plenty of crazy people. I don't necessarily spend a whole lot of time with them, but what would you say you mean by that?
Yeah, that means a lot to me. I was first introduced to that idea by family and, well, by high school friends and football teammates, the Ngakta family and the EK family. And those two men that taught me what that meant, they always said that you're going to be most like the 5 closest people that you surround yourself with. And so in thinking, when they told me that when I was in high school, it made me reflect on what kids I was hanging out with in high school. And it also made me reflect on the people that my mom chose to surround herself with.
So perhaps a kid that might be listening right now feels that they're pigeonholed, feels that they've got a history that's painted their future, right? And so they're hanging out with certain types of people, certain echelon of people, whether it be drug dealers, whether it be people committing crimes and stuff like that. You're saying you don't have to be involved with those people. You can be whomever you want to be. And so surround yourself. And I've found that myself. I mean, I had big programs with money, scarcity and stuff like that when I was starting my personal development journey. And then I started hanging out with a bunch of multimillionaires, and they behave differently. They think differently. They don't live in scarcity. They live in massive amounts of abundance. They don't worry about the little things. And they, for the most part, live a much different lifestyle, less stress and everything. And for me, it's like, yeah, well, of course, you don't have to worry about, are the lights going to get shut off, right? And I connect with your story a lot because I grew up in extreme poverty. I grew up in organized crime. I grew up homeless, moving from couch to couch and drug deals going down. And I very much resonate with a lot of the things that you're saying. I was sleeping in friends' minivans. I was sleeping on friends' floors. I was sleeping in garages and slept on a golf course for a little bit up in Flagstaff, which doesn't work well once the winter comes. So, I understand a lot of the things that you're saying. And I think for me, probably one of the most important things I could have heard in my lows was that I don't need to define myself by my parents' actions. I don't need to define myself by the people that I hang out with, just like you were saying. And that I'm not alone. There are people out there that are suffering through the same things, or not even suffering. There's some people that are subjected to it and they do just fine. But I have a friend, like I was saying, I don't want to mention any names, but I have a friend and she grew up in the foster system, and it was absolutely brutal to her. And she went on to be wildly successful, owns a couple different companies, owns a ranch, and just lives a beautiful life. It doesn't define you. it only defines you as much as you allow it to. And you're not alone in this. There are people out there that have gone through the same situation and came out on top, just like you did.
And PK, would you say that because of your experiences that you've been able to more effectively connect with kids in the foster system?
Yeah, I would. I don't think I would have been able to do all the work that I've done or connect as well as I did with those teens. And I think the most beautiful part of the relationship that I was able to create with those teens is that regardless of when I worked for DCS or now that I no longer work for them, those teens, some of them are still on the run. Some of those are still in dangerous situations. And they feel comfortable enough to still call me on my phone number, text me, or reach out to me. And that means more than a paycheck, than any dollar, than any tangible item I could ever receive.
So you are walking proof that men and women that came up in your circumstances aren't a statistic, don't have to be a statistic. You can't actually pull yourself out of that. So you didn't have anything going in your favor. Nothing was working with PK. Everything was working against PK. PK could really lean on, I was a victim, and he chose out of that at a certain point in your life. And when you chose out of that, you then started learn the opportunities that you would have to help other kids choose out of that. And those relationships that you have with them, I mean, I can't imagine how powerful that must feel in a very positive way, in a fulfilling way when they do reach out. Like that's got to feel pretty amazing.
I've never experienced a feeling quite like it. It fills a void that I didn't know that could be filled.
Yeah. That's really powerful.
And on top of that, you have credibility. So the kids that are the hardest to reach are the ones that need the most love, right? But these kids that are, out there committing some pretty serious crimes, they're just expecting some person to show up, punch their card, clocked in, clocked out, don't care. And then you show up and you're like, I've been here. I know what you're thinking. Oh, you thought you were badass? Like, that's adorable, because I was doing that stuff when I was 7 years old, right? So not saying that they need to be trumped, but they need somebody that actually understands what they've had to go through, because there's a massive difference in opening up to somebody who's just paid to be there versus somebody that's lived through it.
Mm-hmm. And what I was able to do was really meet those children with where they're at. And so I'd work very unorthodox. I'm not going to be your typical case manager. I'm not going to be the typical case manager that just comes and talks to you for 15 minutes and submits their note so that they hit their quota for the week or for the day.
Yeah, because you actually care.
Yeah. And I couldn't tell you the times that I would do unorthodox things. For an example, I had a young man that was reaching close to the age of 18, and his grades were failing. He had F's and D's, and he was not going to pass his last semester of high school. And I had asked his team to get paperwork so that I could go into the high school and shadow him for a day.
Yeah.
And then report to his team. And after doing so, I was able to speak on his behalf, and I was able to acknowledge where he had a lack of, and I was also able to bring to the table of where the school had a lack of, where they were not meeting his needs, where the teacher had bias against him and was not giving him a fair opportunity.
Yeah.
And eventually all parties were able to work together, and that young man graduated high school.
I love it. So when Brandon was talking, he said that you had everything playing against you. And I didn't want to interrupt him. However, I massively disagree with that, because I think you were the right person to have all of those rough things happen to you so that you could turn around and be this unrelenting, unstoppable force that dedicates their entirety to helping these kids climb out of any hole that someone dug for them, they dug for themselves, whatever the situation is, you're showing them how to make a ladder. And so I'd say it played out pretty wonderfully that you went through all of those things so that you can then save a kid from having to go through them. I appreciate you greatly, brother. I really do. I have always had an immense amount of love for you and respect for you, the things that you've gone through, the things that you've gone on to do after going through those things. And again, we're honored to have you in.
Thank you.
Thank you.